MLB announcing their new set of media rights deals with ESPN, NBC, and Netflix. Those deals have yet to be officially announced, but reports suggest they will be announced later today. And we have all the details, Brendon. So I want to give you a quick rundown of what these new deals are going to look like with the three aforementioned partners. ESPN, probably the headline here, will acquire rights to license MLB.TV, the league's out-of-market package akin to, NFL Sunday Ticket. ESPN will also get 30 national window weekday games. And they will also get the rights to in-market rights, I should specify, to 6 MLB franchises that are currently under the league's media rights umbrella. NBC will get Sunday Night Baseball, essentially the old ESPN package. So they're getting Sunday Night Baseball, the wild card round, and then they're also adding the Sunday morning games that were on Roku the last 2 seasons, but had started out on Peacock, ironically enough, the season before that. Netflix is getting just kind of a handful of one-off events. So they're getting the opening night, they're getting Home Run Derby, Field of Dreams, those types of games. They're paying kind of what I would say is an absurd amount of money just for a handful of games. But we'll get to all the financials in a minute. So top line takeaways, Brendon, what do you think of Major League Baseball's new short-term 3-year national media rights deals?
A lot is riding on this, right? I think, you almost can never talk about anything in baseball without eventually getting back to, do the players and the owners want to, I don't want to say a word that's going to get our stream demonetized or something. Do they want to do very bad things to one another, right? Like, that's kind of always the question for baseball, and especially right now where we are headed into a period that most people expect could very well result in a lockout, right? And so a lot of what baseball is doing business-wise and, broadcast package-wise is all with that in mind, right? We know that, for instance, the local package, the MLB.TV service, and some of these other teams that have gotten booted off of or chosen to leave their local cable networks that are now going to be available on this ESPN ingested version of MLB.TV. A lot of that whole effort by Rob Manfred and the league is with the idea of getting a little bit more money for this local content or reimagining how to make money, right? Then you also have the other side of this, the national side of this, which I see as they just have to get as many partners at the table as they can, right? Like, this is kind of a little teaser. It's an appetizer for these broadcast partners that they would like to at least have as bidders at the end of the decade when the new rights deals actually get renegotiated, the ones that Fox and TBS currently hold, right? And so that's kind of how I see this. It's hard to just look at it as what things are going to be for the next 3 years, because frankly, great, more eyeballs in front of it. NBC and Netflix feels a lot better than where this could have gone, right? Like, we're already seeing with the NBA how valuable it is to just have games on broadcast television. Like, I watched the Suns Blazers game last night. It was crazy to just go to channel 12 on my local TV and it's just on. That feels crazy. And so MLB will get a little slice of that, right? But I can say all those things. Really, to me, what this comes down to is this the correct bet for MLB to set itself up for the future? And to me, that's how this will be judged.
I think you're completely right. And I do think you hit the nail on the head with, like, the biggest part of this deal is they're adding 2 major partners in NBC and Netflix. And so now when you go into the next round of media rights negotiations in 2028, you have Fox, you have Turner Sports, you have ESPN, NBC, Apple, Netflix, even Amazon, is in the game on some local levels. Like, you have all of these major media players that are going to be seen as incumbents. And, for the next 3 years, that might not be great for the fans because, it's so fragmented where you get your games. But for Major League Baseball, they're looking to maximize their media revenue. And this is probably how you have to do it, at least in the short term. So I want to kind of get to some of the details of these new 3-year deals with ESPN, NBC, and Netflix. And I think the major part of this is MLB.tv. This is a property that Major League Baseball had never sold to any other media entity prior to this deal that's about to be announced. At the beginning, this is per Sports Business Journal, Major League Baseball is going to hold MLB.tv on its own platform, as well as give it to the new ESPN app. So it's going to be available in 2 places, which I found interesting, especially after reports surfaced earlier this week about ESPN not including it in the YouTube TV deal, and kind of people freaking out that they might need ESPN in order to access this. It looks like, at least at the beginning, it's going to be shared. So ESPN and MLB will both have the out-of-market package available on their own platforms. But the way Sports Business Journal framed this was that, it seems like at some point it will just be on ESPN, and maybe right now it's just a tech issue or getting up to snuff on the back end to where they can handle a package like this. But what are your thoughts initially on ESPN kind of going all in on the local rights here? Because that's kind of what they did. They got the out-of-market package, and they got the 6 in-market teams that are under the MLB's purview. The only national games they're going to have are 30 weekday national window games, during the regular season. So for ESPN, it seems pretty clear that their strategy is going local.
I think for baseball, at this point in time, for the next 3 years, it makes sense to try to get out ahead and be the destination for those games, because that seems to be where, there might be the largest bidding war come 2028, 2029, is to be the place where this all local in and out of market, whatever. Rob Manfred is very publicly trying to assemble a solution to the fracturing of these RSNs and the local cable model that fans had been so used to watching their local MLB and NBA and NHL teams on for years. If I'm anybody that carries content, I want to be the place where that lands. And so ESPN being first to the table there makes sense. It fits their goal of being a must-have sports subscription place, whether that's through your cable provider or that is independently through their app now. And it's probably more valuable in that way for what their business model is right now than even Sunday nights, until baseball reimagines how it does national games and in doing so, like, actually makes them more valuable. I think we've just kind of seen that 1/3 of a big series on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, there's just a limit to how much people really care to make that an appointment for their week and in their viewing schedule.
Yeah. And I think this is borne out in the financials. This was new reporting from Andrew Marchand earlier today. ESPN will be paying the same amount now that they had under their previous Sunday Night Baseball deal. So they're going to still pay Major League Baseball $550 million per season, but for its new package, that includes the out-of-market local games, the 6 in-market teams, and the 30 national games. On the other hand, NBC, who essentially is getting ESPN's old Sunday Night Baseball package, is paying $200 million a year. So just over 1/3 of what Major League Baseball was getting for that inventory prior is about what NBC is going to be paying. And I think that just goes to show you the dichotomy here, right? Like, the media companies are placing a large value on these local rights, but as for the national inventory, it's not really a needle mover for these big media companies. And something I also found interesting in the reporting here, I've never seen this before, Brendon, correct me if I'm wrong. NBC is actually paying a rights fee that is partially based on the ratings they get from these games. This was a detail also by Andrew Martian in his reporting. So NBC will actually pay a maximum of $200 million for this Sunday Night Baseball package, but that could fluctuate based on how good the ratings are throughout the season. Have you seen anything like that in the past?
Not that I can remember, not that we necessarily knew about, but I think it just speaks to where we're at with this stuff, right? So I think, to me, like, that's why so much of this, obviously it's a replacement deal for the final part of a package that got opted out of. Like, it is inherently a stopgap. But I think, like, even in the technicalities of each individual part of it, you just kind of see that, right? What's the viewership going to look like? How valuable is a primetime national baseball game with the way that, content consumption is working right now? It's 6 of 30 local teams. Could that become 30 of 30 in the next 3 years? What is the difference between in market and out of market? Like, it just kind of poses more questions than I think it answers for us. But again, I do come back to the fact that even though Major League Baseball is making significantly less revenue on this package now than it would have been, and, there are still so many questions, I think it's good that they will get their games in front of more people this way. And if that happens, if it goes according to plan, then there should be a good amount of demand for their games, and especially their postseason, when they really need that demand to be there in a few years when they strike an entire new package. And it seems pretty clear they're trying to reimagine how people consume baseball in a pretty big way.
Yeah. And I think another key detail, just to kind of close the loop on something you brought up, is that any other teams that decide to leave their current local broadcast deals and go under the MLB umbrella here, with the 6 teams that are currently in that group, ESPN would also get the rights to those teams as well for their in-market games. So clearly, like, this is something ESPN has thought about and wanted written into their contract, that they could eventually get more teams in that group.
And in a roundabout way, it's funny, right? Like, there's been some conversation about this coming off the YouTube Disney deal that we've been talking about a bunch here, the YouTube TV Disney deal, I should say, where now we're in a situation where, I'll just say in Arizona, right? Like, we lost the D-backs from local cable, from cable locally. Now, though, if I have a cable subscription and I can authenticate the ESPN app with my cable subscription, I can now watch D-backs games again through that, right? Like, is my understanding correct there? Like, I can log in with my cable login to the ESPN app, and now there will be this MLB controlled and licensed version of a D-backs broadcast that I can now get all over again.
I believe you are correct for the in-market teams.
Yes.
For the out-of-market package, so if you want MLB TV, you're still going to have to pay the normal $150 per year subscription fee
to get FanDuel Sports Network or whatever.
Right. Nothing about that is changing. But I do think for the 6 lucky teams, I guess, if you get ESPN Unlimited, you will just get your local teams. No big deal, just included. So it's just
nice. A funny example of, like, this whole dynamic is so circular where we are right now, and as things get figured out, like, what's old is new. And I guess, it's lucky, not for the teams. They're making a lot less revenue off of how this all has played out, but for the fans, if you live in one of those 6 cities, then you're sitting pretty after this deal.
Right. I do want to give MLB credit before we move on to Major League Soccer. They were, in the aggregate, able to secure a larger rights fee than they'd had under their previous deal. Had ESPN not opted out of the Sunday Night Baseball deal in February, but it's because obviously they're selling more inventory, right? So they're selling or licensing MLB TV to ESPN. They're selling the local rights, the additional 30 games that originally no network was airing. So by, selling more of its inventory, Major League Baseball is able to actually secure more national media rights revenue. And I think if we rewind back to the beginning of this year, that seemed like a long shot for MLB.
Yeah.
I didn't think there was any possibility that they would secure, the same amount or exceed the amount of revenue they were getting from ESPN each year. But they found a way to do so. It's just a matter of how much value are they sacrificing on their end by giving MLB TV to a broadcast partner.
Yeah, and by setting a price point on it before they've fully imagined what it will look like, right? Like I think that's one area where it could bite them of if they were able to pull it off and just kind of go to market with it in 2029 and drum up a lot of demand and make it seem really valuable, then that, whereas now you're saying this is what 6 teams local rights and 30 teams out of market rights is worth in 2025. You're setting a number to it that might not be what you would love to negotiate against in 3 years. But the last thing I want to hit you with, Drew, is we saw in this SPJ report, I think this was just their guys trying to get as much information as they could, that Buster Olney and Tim Kirkjian will stay at ESPN. Those guys, they're on some broadcasts, game broadcasts. Olney is on Sunday Night Baseball, but those are not announcers, right? Most of the time. Kirkjian can kind of be like a color guy sometimes, but who are the announcers that you hope or think will get bumped up to these new national windows that are going to be created, whether that is, the Sunday Night Baseball, Netflix, those will probably kind of be like the Christmas NFL where maybe they'll just borrow people. I guess the Sunday morning thing for NBC, like who are the people you could see getting a real bigger shot here that call games for these new networks?
Well, I do think at least I believe Carl Ravitch said during the last wild card broadcast on ESPN that they would hope to see, or they planned on seeing you back next year. So that would tell me that ESPN's probably going to keep that booth together for this weekday package of games. I don't know why you would reinvent the wheel there. I know they're not the most popular booth, but that seems to me to be like the most likely scenario.
Especially because we know ESPN could get back in on like the World Series or whatever in 3 years. So They could actually end up with more games before long. They don't want to break apart their MLB talent roster.
Right. I do think if we're looking at someone for those Sunday morning games, I think typically, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they have a play-by-play announcer, but then they'll poach an analyst from each local team. Maybe that's what Apple does on Friday. I can't really remember, but as someone who I would like to see on a national package, maybe this is a bit of a homer pick being from the DMV, but I think Kevin Brown is an amazing play-by-play announcer for baseball. And he got a wild card series on ESPN the last few years. I think he's just a joy to listen to. And I think he's a rising star in baseball broadcasting. So he's the play-by-play name I would go with. Yep.
I think I heard Mad Dog put his vote behind Dan Schulman to get another bigger chance. He had done some ESPN stuff, Sunday Night Baseball, radio, whatever. And he obviously was in the spotlight because of the Blue Jays run this year. And then Boog Sciambi, I think, is the other one that'll be a hot name for people. I think he's great. I think he's kind of under visible right now with only doing radio and Cubs and some ESPN national stuff. I think he's great. So those three names,
he seems like
the ones.
He seems like someone for NBC's Sunday Night Baseball to me.
For sure. Yeah, and NBC, like we should say too, they're getting these wild card games, so those are pretty well watched. So it's not an insignificant role if you can get it. They'll probably pay decently for that for whoever gets that job.
Yeah, absolutely.